All right, so you're looking into BigBear.ai, huh? Thinking about maybe making it a long-term investment. 10 years down the line? That's smart, thinking ahead. AI is only getting bigger, but figuring out which companies are going to really take off. That's the tricky part.
It is. It really is.
We've got some research here, some analysis on BigBear.ai. Maybe we can figure out where they might be in 10 years. Let's see what we've got.
Sounds good.
So they went public in 2021.
Yes, SPAC merger, right?
Exactly, SPAC merger. And their stock price, it's been like a roller coaster ever since. High of 69 cents, low of just 63 cents and cents half. And now it's just kind of hanging out around $3.40.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty good snapshot of how volatile the AI market can be.
For sure. So where do we even begin with a company like this?
Well, I think before we try to predict the future, we got to understand what BigBear.ai actually does right now, what they're doing, what their business is.
Okay, back to basics.
Exactly. So they develop these AI-powered tools for data mining and analytics.
So they're helping their clients make sense of all that data, the big data everyone's always talking about.
Yeah. Exactly. It's like, imagine trying to find a needle in a haystack, but instead of hay, it's mountains of data.
So they're like data detectives with super-powered AI magnifying glasses.
Uh-huh. Yeah, something like that. But here's the thing.
What's that?
There are a lot of companies out there doing data analytics.
Right. So what makes BigBear.ai different? What makes them special?
That's the key question.
Yeah.
And I think there are two big things that make them stand out. First, their software is modular.
Okay, modular. So it comes in like separate pieces?
Yeah, kind of. But it's more than that. It means that their modules can actually plug right into a company's existing software.
Oh, I see.
So instead of ripping out and replacing their whole system.
Which would be a huge headache, I imagine.
Oh, absolutely. Super expensive, disruptive. So BigBear.ai lets them just kind of add on what they need.
That's clever. Makes a lot of sense. Especially for those big companies that are already set in their ways.
Right, exactly. And the second thing, they're really focused on edge computing.
Now, wait a minute. Isn't everything moving to the cloud these days?
Yeah, the cloud is huge.
Yeah.
But edge computing is gaining traction, especially in certain fields.
Okay, so what is it exactly?
It's about processing data closer to where it's being generated. So on devices, servers at the edge of the network, even on sensors out in the field.
I see.
And this is a big advantage for BigBear.ai, especially with those government contracts they've been getting.
Oh, right. How so?
Well, think about sensitive military data. You can't just put that anywhere. There are all sorts of rules about where it can be stored and processed.
Makes sense.
So with edge computing, BigBear.ai can analyze that data right there on site, securely. No need to send it to the cloud.
So that gives them an edge, literally.
I guess it does.
So they've got these two big things going for them. Modular design, edge computing. Sounds good on paper, but...
There's a but.
A big one. Their growth. It just hasn't been what everyone expected. They missed their revenue targets for 2023 by a lot. Projected $388 million. Only brought in $155 million.
Yeah, that's a big miss.
Yeah.
Definitely something to pay attention to.
So what happened?
Well, I mean, there are some obvious factors. The economy hasn't been great.
Right.
Lots of competition in the AI space. And then you've got things like Virgin Orbit going bankrupt.
Right.
They were a big client for BigBear.ai.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
So that was a hit to their revenue for sure.
No, but those are all external factors, right? Things happening outside of the company. Are there internal factors, too? Things specific to BigBear.ai that might be holding them back?
That's a good question. And I think the answer is yes. To understand that, though, we need to compare BigBear.ai to some of its competitors.
Okay. Like who?
Like Palantir's C3.ai. They've had their own challenges, too. But they've managed to grow a lot faster than BigBear.ai.
So that kind of makes you wonder.
Right. Is BigBear.ai just not as efficient? Is their strategy not as effective? Are they not as good at turning their tech into actual revenue? Those are all things we need to consider.
So even though those external factors played a part, there might be some deeper issues at play here.
Exactly. And that's what makes this whole thing so interesting. We're not just looking at a company's financials. We're trying to understand what's really driving their future.
It's like they've got this amazing sports car, all the latest tech, but they can't seem to get out of first gear.
That's a great analogy.
So how do they shift gears? What are they doing to turn things around?
Well, that's where things start to get really interesting. Hashtag TTS, the Deep Dive episode 2025-01-20, part 2 of 3. Well, for one, they've got new leadership. Mandy Long took over as CEO. She came in and boom, cost-cutting measures started focusing even more on those government contracts.
Right. That $165 million deal with the U.S. Army can't forget about that 5-year contract. Seems like a pretty big vote of confidence.
Yeah, it does. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Remember, we're not just looking at the size of the contract. We want to know, how does this actually turn into revenue? How does it turn into profit? And that can be tricky.
How so?
Government contracts, they can be complicated. There are often delays, bureaucracy, priorities change, all sorts of things that can impact the timeline and the bottom line.
So that Army deal. Potential, not a guarantee.
Exactly. Cautious optimism.
Makes sense.
Um,
But it wasn't just cost-cutting and government contracts. They also bought that other company, Pangiam.
right. All stock deal.
Yeah.
They specialize in AI vision technology. That raised some eyebrows. Seemed like a pretty big shift in their strategy.
Yeah, I remember reading about that. So they're getting into things like facial recognition, all those visual AI applications.
Exactly. And that's a big market.
Yeah.
Huge potential. Could give BigBear.ai a real advantage in areas like security surveillance, maybe even healthcare.
Sounds like a smart move. Get in on a hot new trend.
It could be, but some people were worried that this acquisition makes BigBear.ai even more reliant on buying other companies to grow instead of growing organically.
Ah, I see. So it's like, are they building something themselves or just kind of piecing it together from other companies?
Right, and that can be risky. Acquisitions are expensive, hard to integrate different company cultures, and sometimes they just don't work out the way you hoped.
So we've got a mixed bag here. Big government contracts move into a hot new market, but also concerns about slow organic growth, reliance on acquisitions. It's a lot to take in. So where does this all leave us? Long-term prospects? You're the expert. What do you think?
Well, let's look at the analyst projections. Some are saying BigBear.ai could hit $500 million in revenue by 2035, assuming a 10% compound annual growth rate.
Wow, that's a big jump. But can we trust those projections?
That's the question, isn't it? Got to remember, those are just projections. Based on a lot of assumptions, we need to look at the underlying factors. Are those assumptions realistic?
Okay, so what should we be looking at? What are the red flags?
Debt, BigBear.ai's got $256 million in liabilities. Debt to equity ratio of 2.6.
Okay, break that down for me. What does that mean? Why is that a concern?
It basically means they have a lot more debt than equity. Not necessarily a bad thing, but it definitely means there's more financial risk.
How so?
Well, if their growth doesn't happen as fast as they're hoping, that debt starts to become a real burden. Interest payments eat into their profits. Less money to invest in new stuff.
Like trying to run a marathon with a lead weight strapped to your ankle.
Yeah, something like that.
So we need to be careful with BigBear.ai. Look beyond the hype. Look at the numbers, the risks, the challenges, not just the headlines.
Exactly. It's about due diligence. Really understanding the company before you invest.
So we're back to that uncertainty. They're making moves, got those big contracts, but also some financial red flags. It's a tough call.
It is. But uncertainty? That's part of investing, especially with a company like this. To get a clearer picture, I think it helps to compare them to those more established players. Palantir, C3.ai.
Okay, yeah, let's do that. What can we learn from them? Can they give us any hints about BigBear.ai's path?
Well, Palantir, they've really carved out a niche for themselves, government and intelligence. They've shown that specializing, becoming an expert in a particular area, can be a winning strategy.
But I also remember reading that they've been criticized for relying too much on government contracts. What if the government changes its mind? Or cuts funding? Isn't that a big risk for them?
Huge risk.
Yeah.
And it's something BigBear.ai needs to be aware of. They're putting a lot of eggs in that basket.
So diversify. Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah.
What about C3.ai? Haven't they taken a more diversified approach?
They have targeted a wider range of industries, gives them more flexibility, maybe less vulnerable to ups and downs in any one market.
But I thought they were having trouble scaling their business, managing costs. Seems like finding that balance between specializing and diversifying is a real challenge.
It is. It really is. And that's what makes this whole AI market so fascinating. Things change so quickly. What works today might not work tomorrow. And both Palantir and C3.ai, they've had plenty of doubters over the years, people questioning their valuations, their growth. But they've managed to adapt, survive, keep pushing forward, keep innovating. Hashtag TTS, the Deep Dive episode 2025-0120, part 3 of 3.
So they're tough. They know how to stay in the game, even when things get rough. Makes you wonder, does BigBear.ai have that same kind of fight?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're really trying to figure out here. Can they not only survive, but actually thrive in this market?
It's tough out there.
They're kidding. But I feel like we've gotten a pretty good look under the hood. Their tech, the challenges they're facing, how they're trying to turn things around, even how they stack up against the big dogs. Palantir C3.ai.
Don't forget those financials. That debt-to-equity ratio. Can't ignore that. Got to connect the dots, see the big picture. Try to understand where BigBear.ai is headed.
It's definitely been a deep dive, more than just glancing at their stock price or reading a headline. So, where do we end up? What's the verdict? BigBear.ai's future. What's your take?
It's tough to say. There are good signs. They're making smart moves. They've got some exciting tech. But there are also some big question marks. That debt, their reliance on government contracts, those are things that could really hold them back.
And who knows what the political landscape will look like in 10 years. Government priorities change, budgets get cut. That could have a huge impact on a company like BigBear.ai. Absolutely. Predicting the future is impossible.
Yeah.
That's part of what makes investing so risky and so exciting.
It's a real choose-your-own-adventure story. So it sounds like we need to think about the bigger picture here. Not just how BigBear.ai is performing, but the whole world they're operating in, all those geopolitical forces that can lift a company up or drag it down.
Exactly. You got it. And that brings us back to the big question. Is BigBear.ai a good long-term investment? Well, we've given you the information, the insights. Now you got to make that call.
No crystal ball.
Yeah.
But a better understanding of what to look for, that's for sure. So to sum it all up, BigBear.ai's future. It's uncertain. There are paths to success, but there are also some real obstacles they'll need to overcome.
And that big question mark. Will those government contracts be their saving grace, or will they end up being their downfall? Only time will tell.
It's a gamble, no doubt about it. But that's what investing's all about. Weighing the risks and the potential rewards, making sure you're comfortable with the unknown.
Exactly. And remembering that there are no guarantees. Especially in a field like AI, things change so fast.
Well said. Well, big thanks to you for joining us on this deep dive into BigBear.ai. Hope you learned something, maybe even got a little excited about the possibilities.
It's been my pleasure.
And to all of you listening, keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep. We'll catch you on the next episode of The Deep Dive.